Chips. After the shocking violence at the Williambilla siege, there have been many questions of what to do. The murder of a neighbour and 2 police officers by the trains has triggered calls for more action to track and trace gun ownership across the nation. Today at National Cabinet, the Premier has proposed a national firearms ownership registry, and the National Police Union is calling for that register to be paid for by the sales of proceeds of crime. Dr. Terry Goldsworthy is a criminologist at Bond University on the Gold Coast. Terry, good afternoon. There's a long history in this country of calls for a national firearm ownership registry, isn't there? I mean, that goes all the way back to John Howard's days and Port Arthur.
Yeah, you're quite correct. You know, after the Hoddle Street massacre and after Port Arthur, there were calls to have a national approach to firearm information and ownership. So, look, it's a logical step to me. I think there's been some criticisms of the existing database in terms of the amount of information contained within it and how accessible that is for different jurisdictions. And there's a lack of a consistent approach across those jurisdictions. So, a national approach, I assume, managed to some degree by the AFP or the Australian Criminal Intelligence Commission, I think would be a benefit to law enforcement.
What would a registry provide law enforcement with?
Well, I guess, you're going to capture, I would think, I don't know the intimate details, but details around licences, who's licensed, what are they licensed for, the details of the firearms they have, the particular types, how many, etc. I mean, we now know that in Australia there's about 3.5 million registered firearms. And what we've seen is an increase in terms of the amount of firearms people are owning, but a decrease in the amount of proportion of Australians who own a firearm. So we've got less people owning them, but those who do own them, they have more of them. So we need to keep track of those firearms to ensure that, I guess, if you look at instances where police do have to attend somewhere, they can rest assured in the knowledge that they can access all of the information available in Australia and perhaps not just some patchy information from the state or other information nationally that may be having gaps in it as such when they attend. Because
there are existing databases, aren't there? What are the problems with those?
Well, look, you're correct. There's the Australian Firearms Information Network and there's the National Firearms Identification Database. Now, the Information Network tells us, information about each firearm in Australia known to police and law enforcement agencies. So, therefore, they've got some current information in relation to those ownerships. The Identification Database is basically a reference tool that helps the police identify and record firearms in a consistent way. So, the first one probably tells you the movement of a firearm, etc., licensing, registration details. The second one will give you the particulars of the actual firearm. Now, I don't have access to those firearm databases, so what they're missing, I'm not exactly sure, but obviously the police aren't happy with what they currently have and they've made that statement in the public forum. So I imagine they're looking for a much more comprehensive and accurate and consistent recording of information in real time that they can access when they're going out to jobs, etc.
One of the arguments I've heard against a national database from sporting shooters is that if that information was hacked, for instance, and fell into the wrong hands, then it gives nefarious, types ready access to the exact locations of firearms across Australia. What are your thoughts about that?
Oh, look, I don't think that holds much credence. I mean, if someone wants to get a firearm that desperately, they've just got to sit outside the local gun club and follow someone home to do that kind of action. So, look, I mean, there's dangers of computer hacking in terms of cyber crime, etc. On anything that we put up on the cloud. It doesn't stop us doing it. We just need to make sure it's got sufficient integrity that no one will be able to get into it and hack it as such. And I would think that law enforcement would have very sophisticated protocols around any information that's sensitive like that to protect and prevent that from happening.
Internationally, Australia is very well known for having enacted strict and well-supported gun laws. Do you think it's a bit incongruous then with our international image that we don't have a national firearm registry?
Look, I think, there's always room for improvement. They do have some kind of national network. There's obviously flaws with that. Otherwise, you wouldn't see the agitation from the police associations to get a new one on the board. So I think in terms of firearms and firearm crimes. I did a book chapter last year where I looked at the militarisation of police in Australia, and we actually do very well in terms of firearm crime when compared to other parts of the world. So I think we're travelling okay. The issue is, there's a grey market out there where the estimates are that there could be anywhere up to 260,000 unlicensed firearms. And there's also about, that includes 10,000 handguns that won't be on this system because they're unlicensed. They're in that grey market. Many of them get diverted into the illicit market. So as to the impact it will have, you're relying on, if you're going somewhere, that the person's got a licensed firearm for this system to protect you. If it's unlicensed, a grey weapon, etc., it may not make much difference for you.
Professor Terry Goldsworthy, really appreciate your thoughts on this issue. Thanks so much for sharing them.
Thank you.
Associate Professor Terry Goldsworthy is a criminologist at Bond University on the Gold Coast and a former police detective at 4:45.